that band and using that band. And apart from that, the ecosystem is available. It's not that we're going to make a decision at the regulatory level, but then we need to wait 2 years. Things can happen right now. Another important aspect, and here I will go back to what I said in the beginning, is that if we focus on the development of technology, then we will allow for technologies to complement each other and progress. So please consider sharing the spectrum, looking into not having one service prevail upon the other. So it's not migrating so one system can use the band and the other can't. We can protect those existing services, allow for them to grow while also enabling new other technologies to come into play. And my final message would be that we have multiple available technologies. They're ready to use, they're complementary to what we already have, and they're sustainable. So the call here is for you to consider those options, analyze them, and for us to discuss case by case how we can implement them. Thank you. Thank you for that, Marta.
Thank you very much. This is a very important contribution regarding knowledge on spectrum, which is essential in this discussion about connectivity and access. And in particular, our reflection that you made, which is related with to the 21 recommendations, which are the result of a dialogue between the two PCCs, the number 1 and 2. Normally we have meetings separated and we don't work on the same topics, and this is also reflected in previous conferences of the ITU, where the radio sector and the development sector were working really in harmony in terms related with the spectrum, and in particular the ones that participate in this might remember the discussions about Resolution 9 of the World Conference, and the fights between the radio sector saying, don't get into spectrum, you don't know about this, and the development sector saying, well, please don't talk about the development sector, that it's not yours. So in the end, we're working in harmony, and this is a very good reflection of that, this document of the 21 resolutions on the topic. Before we continue with our last panelist, Marta, these topics on the secondary use are very important, and of course, some governments have had more time to make a more detailed analysis of this and what the implications are for the smaller operators, the thing of technological neutrality and the need to have the cost opportunity topic, so that decisions are taken promptly and not wait until to see what happens in other countries and with other technologies. In this sense, I think that thinking about the next conference, we hope to have the active participation, your active participation, and of your organization as well as of everyone else, so that the region gets to the WTDC with very concrete objectives. Again, Marta, thank you very much. And we will continue with our last panelist, José Luis Ayala from the GSA. And I don't know if Maria Celeste has any housekeeping, or if we can just continue with José. Thank you very much, Santiago. We'll continue with José. I just wanted to say that the presentation was available. Okay, thank you very much, José. Well, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. Firstly, in the name of the GSA, I want to thank the invitation of CITEL to participate in this important dialogue. We celebrate all these initiatives that are in CITEL to close this digital divide, and we think that this is not a technology issue. This is a public policy issue, which is recurrent, and we've seen it with each new generation, each stage in the history of ICTs. And we consider that mobile technologies of the 4th and 5th generation can really support this objective and contribute in the implementation of other technologies as well. Let's see if I can change the slide here. I don't know if I can change it. Okay, there we go. So very briefly, for those who don't know GSA, it's an organization, a non-profit organization that represents manufacturers of the mobile environment. We have more than 3 decades in business, and we support the environment of the ecosystem in this sense. We have a very useful tools for the decision makers in the public and the private sector. Our vision, and this is not a slide that was prepared for this, it's the vision of GSA is to communicate most of the population, so worldwide, and to be able to achieve the interconnection of 100 billion devices by the end of the decade. So to achieve this, the GSA participates actively in spectrum planning conferences, for example, in the ITU. And nowadays, we're celebrating the new 2020 standard and the adopting of the standard of a new radio within these resolutions, which will allow a very good development of the 5G technology globally. So 5G is already, has been mentioned a lot worldwide in the industry. In the next 5 years, it will be positioned as the digital transformation tool of the economy, and it will encompass many sectors. Just to mention some, manufacturing, intelligent transport, health, education, and many others. In this aspect, inclusion, digital inclusion, is a topic of high priority for many administrations. I'm talking about digital inclusion of 5G. Some of them, for example, in the case of the United States, in the CITEL region, they're already investing very important resources to close this digital divide by adopting 5G. There are initiatives in this country that have been proposed to create funds of $100,000 for this task in particular. According to the reports of the industry, the worldwide ones of the ITU, the digital footprint in the rural areas is due to many factors that are very complex, but there's a lack of relevant content, a lack of connectivity, and to some extent coverage. We see that 5G, even though it's achieved a really large scale globally in very little time, we have more than 140 networks and more than 140 operators who continue working with investment. In the region of Latin America, there are a lot of networks, and in the United States, in North America, so in Canada as well. Basically, there are 10 countries that have fifth generation networks. And we hope that in 2021, there are new places with 5G, with the options that have already been granted in countries, for example, such as Chile, Brazil, Dominican Republic, and Peru. In this initial stage, it's important for the administrations to provide operators with regulatory frameworks that are predictable, with regulations that boost the investments in all the regions, including rural areas. Regarding devices, there's already an ecosystem that's very rigorous for the devices. There's around 600 devices that are used commercially. More than half are already available commercially. Here, we recommend CITEL to continue identifying and liberating a spectrum in bands for 4 and 5G that are harmonized, standardized on a global level, and to reduce the issue of the lack of affordability by consumers, especially in rural areas. So intelligent smartphones of like a low band are very important in the rural areas, and they make it easier to disseminate important content in those areas, which are some key factors to improve the digital divide. So it could be considered to remove taxes and to provide incentives so that consumers in those areas are able to get those smartphones. Smartphones are devices that people use the most to access the internet. Statistics are incredible. We have, for example, a higher use than laptops, than toothbrushes even. So one of the tools that we consider key to improve the digital divide is the bettering of the spectrum. So we want the spectrum to continue to be liberated, but in adequate conditions, giving priority to the social benefit and the macroeconomic benefit over the short-term ones. So it's essential to have a dialogue with the authoritative of the ICTs and the authorities and the congresses of the countries to achieve a commitment in this section. So higher cost means less investments, fewer investments, and fewer population connected. So we need to see which are the bands that have a better position to provide connectivity in rural areas, and try to check the affordability issues and coverage issues that we talked about before. Some CITEL administrations can still free the spectrum in bands of 700 and 600 megahertz to benefit the populations. And these bands are important to provide coverage of services in cities. Higher bands are important to provide capacity in places where it is needed, even in rural areas. This can be, for example, airports, ports, harbors, hospitals, industrial parks, and all that. So the whole spectrum plays an important role. Some of the most important developments that the industry has had at a global level are the fixed wireless connections. Here in the region of Latin America, there is still a task to solve, specifically in the rural areas, which is that according to the data of the ITU, the data indicates that North America has a penetration of the fixed band of around 49% by 2019. In Latin America, the penetration of the services is around 11%. So 89 out of 100 people in Latin America still don't have broadband connection. And this affects the rural areas the most. So here, the advances in access to the wireless fixed access, and so 5G really provides an alternative to provide fixed access to homes in rural areas in a way that is better than traditional technologies. In the tests that were done by the members of the GSA, speeds of even 1 gigabyte per second were achieved in 5G connections for a maximum of 7 kilometers using the spectrum in millimetric bands. These are not ideal conditions, but they provide very effective connections for the rural areas, and which lower the cost of access to the services. Also, on the other hand, many reports of the industry that were mentioned, recent measurements of 5G commercial networks show that the speeds are much higher than the ones used normally, traditionally in public internet. And it shows that the experience of these consumers can be improved. So 3 things to finish that are very important. One thing is to remove the payment of the spectrum from the providers in exchange for investment in rural areas. Countries like Colombia did it recently. Chile always has this type of contest, and they are some of the best connected countries in the region. Also, the universal access program has to be there, and we have to have technological neutrality so that any type of technology can provide the best connectivity according to the scenario of connectivity of the consumers. And finally, something that we indicated is the reduction of prices of the spectrum, and also for the terminals, the mobile terminals of 4th and 5th generation, which have already been done in several countries of the world. This is also a measurement that can improve and help us improve in this sense. Thank you very much. It's been a very short time. Sorry, I know that Zoom is not a tool that I'm very familiarized with. Thank you for the invitation, and I am available to answer questions. Thank you, Jose. Unfortunately, this virtual aspect makes us have this kind of plenary in a very short time. This is a very important topic that in real life, in a normal situation, we could talk about it all day because the topics really can have that. But thank you very much. The liberation of the spectrum is very important, and the discussions that we need to have on this, and the need to coordinate among the different agents, including GSA, the satellites, the government, everything, and then the community networks, because in the end, the objective is the same, to connect more.
Jose, I wasn't able to hear the 3 recommendations. One of those recommendations was, I didn't hear it because I know that the second one had to do with technological neutrality in national broadband programs. The third one was to possibly eliminate VAT and other taxes as well. But the first one, I couldn't actually understand. Are you recommending that for those operators who are investing in rural remote areas to have the government, in exchange for that investment, to offer something to them? What would be offered? Well, there are some countries that have already implemented this mechanism in a very effective way. It has to do with exempting those operators from paying for the tender or for renewing their spectrum licenses if they're providing services and investing in infrastructure in those areas. As a matter of fact, in Colombia, the last tender that was carried out was rather innovative and allowed for, out of that payment for obtaining a license in the 700 megahertz band, for them to use 60% of that for investment in infrastructure in areas that are not covered. So what we consider is that expanding those existing networks is much more efficient than deploying new infrastructure, especially if we see an area where you have a cloud of mobile network connectivity, to expand that rather than creating and deploying more infrastructure, especially since those mobile terminals are the most used, even now during the pandemic. So now we've seen that in countries that have implemented the solution, such as Colombia and France, where the renewal of all spectrum licenses for 4th generations allowed for operators to voluntarily use that payment that they would use to renew the license to deploy infrastructure in rural areas. France was actually at the forefront of this, and Chile always used, of course, those beauty pageants in order to ensure that there was coverage in the areas where they were taking place. And that makes a lot of sense, of course. But we do need to remember that in high bands, we can only get specific coverage like in industrial parks and schools and so on and so forth. But Chile was actually at the forefront because of this model of beauty pageants, and it has actually become one of the better connected countries in the region. So we believe that these are innovative mechanisms that actually are at the disposal of governments. And we know that there are actually industries that don't pay for the use of the spectrum, of that free use spectrum, or they pay a menial amount. But at the end of the day, the adoption of these technologies and the quality of the service is important and is useful, and all technologies have a fundamental role. If we look at the big picture, this is something that needs to be expanded. So I'm not proposing something that has not been used before, and I'm not proposing something that other sectors or other technologies are not getting in the first place. I think that that's important to remember. Thank you, Jose. And thank all of you. This has been an incredible panel. I'm so sorry not to have more time and not to be face to face meeting somewhere across the region, but such is life. I hope we will have the opportunity to get together soon. But perhaps to summarize this and looking towards the work that we have ahead of ourselves, and despite of the collective and individual work that you are doing, I think we need to think about where we're headed in the future with the ITU and with CITEL in order to harmonize our work and then to get to the WTDC with a list of well-articulated proposals that can reflect something that has been particularly important throughout this seminar, because you have all spoken about multi-stakeholderism, and I think CITEL provides a clear example, a special example for this. We have, I don't know, 110 companies that are associated to CITEL. We have people from civil society, we have the technical internet community, and a seminar such as the one that we have is a clear example of how we are working jointly and collaborating, and we are showing the need for governments to show this and to actually use this in their telecommunication meetings. And I don't know, Oscar, how we move ahead now after congratulating everyone and taking pictures. And I do want to invite all of you to continue participating in the next preparatory meeting of Americas on the 26th and the 27th of April. And then on the 28th all the way to the 30th, we have a meeting of the PCC1 where we will continue discussing topics of relevance. That particular meeting is the last meeting, and it's the last opportunity for the region to express its opportunities and for the region to define the priorities that answers to all the significant points of view that every single one of you from your multiple perspectives have brought to the table. So once again, thank you. It has been a privilege and a pleasure to participate in this webinar. And Oscar, do let us know when we have to smile and clap for the picture. Thank you, Santiago. Thank you to all the members of the panel for sharing your points of view. Definitely, we don't have that much time to do things through a webinar. And something that we have been doing for other areas is to have roundtables and work roundtables, because it's good to have a panel where we share and we listen to each other, but then having work panels, especially when we work on specific topics. We had 8 roundtables for COVID, so we will also try to do something similar as well. So when we start working with the PCC, we'll probably have spaces for work groups in order to continue building on your recommendations and then move forward with your suggestions for the adjustments that the government should be doing. So we will be coordinating this and organizing this, and we will be letting you know more about it later on. Once again, to summarize, thank you everyone for joining us. We had over 300 people in attendance using this platform. And as you know, this issue can take us days and days to discuss, but unfortunately we don't have more time. So I want to ask you please to smile so we can take a picture. Oh wait, Santiago. Yes, I smile all the time, but before my final smile, I would recommend, Oscar, especially for the work tables, is to see how we could facilitate that space. And I hope that there are joint work tables between the PCC1 and PCC2, and for them to also include participants from the seminar. And let's see how we can bring in this discussion into the agenda of the PCC1. Once again, thank you and let us smile. Yes, Santiago. As a matter of fact, when we had roundtables, the roundtables are open. So even people who are not part of the CITEL can join us. So that opens the door for all voices to be heard. We have even invited other organizations to hear about connectivity. So that's the idea. We want to make this as open as possible so everyone can be heard. So now, once again, please smile for the final screenshot so that we can share this on Twitter. Okay, well, thank you. Without further ado, I hope I get to see you all in next roundtables, seminars, or events. Take care. Be safe. Congratulations, everyone. Thank you.
Gracias.